Welcome to Chai Mitzvah's community event, Purim, the holiday in hiding. We're looking forward to fun and a meaningful discussion and connection. During this time of COVID, we no longer take the power of a caring community for granted. For those of you who haven't joined us before, Chai Mitzvah is dedicated to the mission of encouraging each individual to grow their Judaism in a way that's meaningful for them. Chai Mitzvah groups are much like book groups, and we want to inspire you to form your own Chai Mitzvah group for friends and family using a variety of turnkey source books on different topics. If you enjoyed this Purim conversation, please consider forming your own monthly Chai Mitzvah group with people you know who'd be inspired by meaningful conversations around Jewish texts. If you'd like to form a group but have it taught by an experienced teacher rather than lead it yourself, you can form a Zoom room group. I know that when I looked at your registrations, you probably saw the questions, but probably didn't understand. So I'm going to explain. Ask friends to form a Chai Mitzvah group with you. Give the group a name and register it on the Chai Mitzvah website. There's no cost to do this. When you register for a webinar, fill in the part of the registration where you're asked name of Zoom room group. When we're planning the breakout rooms, your group will be given a room of its own. So you get the best of both worlds, a professional teacher, large group discussions with a greater community, and small group discussions with your Chai Mitzvah group. If you have any questions about this, you can email me. I'll be sending out a follow-up email, and you can just respond to it when you get it. It'll go to me. And now it's time for some Purim fun, discussion, and connection. Reb Deb?
Thank you, Nina. Welcome to our program on Purim. Chag Sameach, everybody. Happy Purim. And we will be covering several different themes in keeping with the holiday of Purim this evening. One of them is courage and responsibility, also concealment, assimilation, and giving. We'll begin with the prayer for Purim. On Purim, there are three prayers that are recited when the Megillah is read. We have them on screen with a transliteration at the bottom, and please remain muted, but join me in your own homes to recite the first blessing for the reading of the Megillah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, al mikra Megillah. And just an FYI, you are not commanded to read the Megillah, but to hear the Megillah being read. And that's the commandment for this holiday. The second blessing that we read is the blessing for miracles, which is a blessing you might be familiar with hearing because we read it, for example, on Hanukkah. Please join me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, she'asa nisim la'avotenu, bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh.
Amen.
And the third blessing is the Shehachianu. And the Shehachianu is a blessing recited on the occasion of doing something for the first time. And this is the first time we're together this year. And it is Purim, obviously, for the first time this year. And so we recite a hearty Shehachianu together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Shehachianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen.
And we are thanking God for letting us arrive at this season and this time. Amen. Our virtual Purim event has meaningful conversation as well as some Purim levity. Here to kick off the conversation is Mr. Hamantashen.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Heyman.
Heyman who?
Hey, man, what you doing after the webinar?
Corny but funny, and that's Mr. Hamantashen. Purim is all about hiding and hidden meanings. For example, Esther hid her Jewish identity, including her real name. The root of the name Esther in Hebrew is Hester, or hidden. Her birth name was Hadassah, meaning myrtle. We know that people hide their identities during Purim by wearing a costume and masking. God, while clearly a force in the Megillah story, is not actually mentioned or seen in the Megillah, and so God's presence is hidden. And assimilation, another theme, is also about hiddenness and concealment. We sometimes feel uncomfortable sharing all of our traditions with our non-Jewish neighbors. These are themes we will cover this evening. Masks are a major theme of Purim. And we have some people on screen tonight who are actually wearing masks. Unfortunately, we wear masks all the time now due to the pandemic. And we wonder, what do masks hide? We turn to a large group discussion to address this question. Masks hiding, Lori?
For those who are hearing impaired and hear by basically reading lips, I think that they are must be struggling with this COVID pandemic because they can't see anybody's lips.
Yeah.
I just wondered if anybody ever mentioned that or had that experience, but I don't know.
But that's another aspect of it that really is a very serious aspect to consider, because it really isolates even further, right? When you are cut off in that way as well.
Yeah.
We have a question for small group discussion. We're going to do some breakout groups for a few minutes now. And the question is and the question is also in the chat so that you can access it when you go into the chat room. How do we make ourselves known? If we are masked, how do we make ourselves known despite the mask? And that's your question for discussion in your small groups. So we'll see you in a few minutes, and Nina will be sending us into breakout groups for about 7 minutes of discussion.
Right. And the question is in the chat box if you need to look at it. Okay.
I love the way everyone pops back, and now we're all together again. This is awesome. This is great.
Okay.
Who's calling
I
you?
think we must all be
Yeah,
back.
I'm sorry, we were in the middle of something.
Oh no.
That's okay.
Well, we wanted to ask you to share, how do you make yourselves known? What are some of the things that your groups might have come up with? And we wanted to do a very quick sharing of that. So maybe one sharing from each of the groups before we go forward. How do we make ourselves known? And whoever wants to just offer a share.
By speaking.
Okay, by speaking. Wonderful. How else do we make ourselves known? Because we're masked. So how are we going to do this?
By the expression around our eyes.
Yes, that's a very important, that's a very important way to do it as well. Anything else that any groups came up with, Ellen?
This wasn't in our group, but body language.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
right.
Thank you. Yeah,
Right.
that's such an important
think of
piece.
that.
So we've got
Yeah.
expression, words, eye expression, body language. Anything else?
Donation, your voice.
The tone of your voice?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, also probably your clothing, what you wear.
exactly, right, because you really present yourself that way. I mean, it gives a message about who you are as well. And anything
We
else?
we spoke about a little bit of the difference between our inner and our outer selves. And if we feel like the outer self is the same self, and a lot of us felt that we have two selves, and that's hard because the outer self is what people see. And if you don't know somebody, if you know somebody, then you're comfortable and you feel like there's synergy between the inner self and the outer self. But when you come into a new situation with new people, sometimes it's hard because you have this outer self that may be very different than your inner self.
Yeah.
And some of us felt more understood or more transparent about that than others.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because if they don't match, it's not true. Other last comments? Yeah, Ellen? Yeah.
No, I'll just, it occurred to me talking about how people tone, but sometimes that's very misunderstood. And cultural differences,
Exactly.
age differences, customs. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's really
something
interesting.
to become sensitive about, because it can be a very different message that's conveyed, that's heard than what's intended.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true because, all of that varies. There's a cultural overlay to everything, and we have to, keep track of that. And I'm just thinking, as you're saying that, if someone is masked or covered, covered/masked, you may not know who they are or where they're from, because that may be hidden as well. So something to keep in mind as we think about this. And we're going to go forward now and explore some other pieces of Purim and see how they fit together. We have another visitor on screen who will be joining us, Ms. Hamantashen, and let's hear what she has to say.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Vashti. Vashti who? Wash the dishes. The kitchen is a mess.
What'd she say?
Wash the dishes. The kitchen is a mess. You said, knock, knock, who's there? Vashti. Wash the dishes.
So we think sometimes that, it seems like dishes are thought of as a women's responsibility, traditionally. And this brings us to a point of discussion about Esther's role as a leader, and especially as a female leader, which is another major theme of our Purim story. And our sub-themes under that are responsibility and courage. So Nina, if you wouldn't mind, would you read the text for us?
Sure. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message from Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that whosoever, whether man or woman, comes to the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law for him, that he be put to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. However, I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai bade them to return the following reply to Esther. Think not that you escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you hold your peace at this time, then with relief and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Who knows whether you have come to the royal estate for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them answer Mordecai, Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maidens and I will fast in like manner. And so will I go to the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
Thank you, Nina. I appreciate that. And the question for consideration that we will share in a large group is, what strengths can we identify in Esther's personality, and how did she use them to help her people? So we're looking for, through the narrative and through what you know about Esther, some strengths in her personality and how she used them to help her people. Margaret?
She did not exhibit a negative bias that really clouded her. This is what we can do because this is how it is, and this is always how it is. You cannot go before the king. She sort of got herself out of that construct and freed herself from that.
Which was very important. I think it moved things forward for the people. So that's a good point. Other people, what do you think we can identify as strengths of Esther? Lori, did you want to share? I wasn't sure if you were.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
No,
Anybody, just raise your hand and unmute yourself. What strengths does Esther have? Barbara, please. Yeah.
She's very strategic, and she makes a very specific plan.
So as my grandmother would say, she was well thought out. She said that in Yiddish, of course, when she said it, but I remember that. Yes. So you're absolutely right. She really had a plan, and she knew where she was going. And I wonder what other strengths we can see in Esther's personality. She's quite a leader. She's actually used as an example when we teach about women leaders. And we have a curriculum in Chai Mitzvah that looks at that. And her story is one of the main stories that we study.
Yeah.
So anything else that impresses you about Esther? Howard?
Well, she had a lot of courage and faith, it seems. She was risking her life and, for the Jews. So she must have been brave and courageous. And, it's part of the story. So it kind of had to go that way.
But I think you mentioned something that we haven't talked about yet, which is that she had faith. And that faith was a real strength that she had that was able to help her think and plan and go forward. And as Margaret said earlier, it helped her step outside the box, and she didn't just, buy the existing party line, so to speak. She was able to really move in a new direction, which was very helpful in taking the people where they needed to go. So other thoughts?
She also, like other people, like Moshe, and she didn't want this job. She didn't jump at this job, and she had a great deal of humility and maybe fear, but she had to be persuaded. And that wonderful line that this is your time, maybe this is why you've been put on the earth to do that, just resonates through the ages for all of us as we think about what are we put on the earth to do, what is our mission. But she didn't want this job. She didn't jump at the chance at first.
And she carried it out with honor. She really embraced it and did what she needed to do. I mean, that's such a good point. And when she talked about the ta'anit, the fast, she said everyone should do it. She said, and we're going to do it too. So there was no separation. It wasn't like, well, the people will do it, but I'm over here. She really joined and connected with everybody. And what was good for the people was also good for her. So a question to consider about Esther. Do you think her approach was uniquely feminine? And that is a question for small group discussion. Do you think her model was a feminine model? And let's see what you come up with. So we'll see you shortly as you go into your breakout rooms again. I think we're all back. Okay. And so the question is, was Esther's approach uniquely feminine? What did you all think? Would anyone like to share?
Margaret, I think you should share.
No, I think Dan was going to share on behalf. Dan, you're on.
Okay, I try to be humble, but because I was saying that I strongly disbelieve in gender stereotypes, and when I'm given the whole idea of the gender binary, but I was wondering if by feminine we were talking about the Shekinah, the feminine aspect of Hashem.
So that's a good analogy to make, and it's always good to bring the Shekinah into the conversation because it's good to have that piece of it and that other aspect of it. So other thoughts about Esther's model? What was her leadership model like? Really, that's what we're talking about.
Well, I think she had a lot of chutzpah.
I was going to say yes.
More so than the average woman.
Other thoughts about Esther? Was she a collaborative leader? Was she, a top-down leader? I mean, what do you think?
Well, she talked about the fast in that reading, and she said, I will fast along with you. So, I mean, you would think that somebody in the monarchy, whatever, would say, well, now you fast, but I'm not going to do it. Kind of like Trump saying, well, I'm not going to wear a mask. I just thought. Sorry.
So it's interesting because maybe there was like a fluid boundary between Esther and the people that she was, ruling, so to speak, or involved with. And she didn't really observe a rigid boundary or a hierarchy between herself and the people, and the other people, which is an interesting model of leadership because it's very unique for that time. I mean, think back to when we're talking about this is not, last month and it's not last year. It's a very long time ago when women's role in society was very different. And so Esther challenged the stereotypes and started to move through that. So any other thoughts on Esther? And, I was just going to ask you also, what lessons do you take away from her as a leader? What lessons does she leave you to think about in terms of being a leader? Because Esther is someone we think about. She's a figure in our history that
Yeah.
comes up again and again and again.
Yeah, the person that comes to mind is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, she's what a woman she was. Too bad she.
Yeah, too bad she's not here anymore.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. So she was pretty outspoken and well spoken.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you, Lori.
And-
Others? Any?
And so was Esther.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a
Outspoken and
parallel.
well
Yeah,
known.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a parallel there. So maybe RBG learned from Esther.
Interesting thought. Never thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, I really wonder, because she was an amazing, here are two amazing women leaders, you know, from different periods in history that changed the course of history. Both of them changed the course of history, and both of them took a path that was not well worn for women. You know, they were trendsetters, if you think about them that way.
You know, it's interesting because in Jewish society, well, women really have always gotten the bum deal. I mean, it's like when I think about like the Hasidic families, I mean, the women are always doing the work and the men are, being educated or whatever, but it's the women who are kind of left out of the whole scene.
So I wonder if women are educated in a different way. They come to their education through a different means, and then use it in different ways, which is all about Esther. It's really all about her. Ellen, I think you had your hand up. Did you not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in our group, something that came up was perspective, and kind of where we are now is making me just ponder. Have women in reality had as insignificant a role as we're given credit for? Who's writing the history, and who?
Men.
Exactly, and
White men.
my perspective makes me think of textbooks used across America, which leave out huge blocks of history, huge groups of people, huge individuals of people, and leave them out, and just the question that was just asked, or maybe the learning is not the learning that is in charge of the hierarchy, but it doesn't make it any less learning, and maybe the influence and leadership isn't what's written into the books, but it might not any less be there, and so I very much wonder.
It's very interesting what you just said. You actually inspired me to think in a different way when you said what you said, which is that I think women they've been hidden, and they have led from behind the scenes, and that that just further reinforces this theme. And I think of Deborah, for example, who again her story is in one of the curriculum books from Chai Mitzvah that we teach about responsibility is the topic, and how Deborah with the military leader Barak, she goes behind the scenes and he leads the troops, and he says, I'm not going unless you're going with me. And she says, okay, fine, I'll go with you. But know that, history is going to be determined. The outcome of this is going to be determined by a woman. He just says, it's fine. Like, I don't care. Just, you're coming with me. Right. I mean, he said it a little differently than that, but the story was, here was behind the scenes, and, and the enemy general in that story was murdered by a woman behind the scenes. She was in the tent. And, so it's history being written in a different way, and we have to look under. I think we have to work harder. So I want to transition to our last piece of the story, which is in the story of Purim. One of the hidden items is Esther's identity. She doesn't let anybody know at first that she's Jewish. Remember, if you know the story a little bit, and we still face this issue in a similar way today. We often question when to assimilate, how much to assimilate, and what is our comfort level in terms of assimilation, in terms of tradition versus outside community. And the text for our next conversation is a very brief one, and it's a comedian.
We have our fun holidays too, though, right? Purim's a good one, right? How would you explain Purim? That's pretty easy. I'll just put Purim is what? Right, Halloween and St. Patrick's Day, sort of a combination of the two. That's cooler than anything that exists in the Gentile world. That's the only holiday you can walk out of your house with like a bottle of Jack Daniels in one hand, vodka in the other. Your neighbor can look at you. Where are you going? Synagogue. Have fun in church, loser. Right? That's
That's cute.
So it's a very brief clip, but he touches on a theme that's very important, which is that of assimilation. So, when we are celebrating a holiday that's uniquely Jewish, what is our comfort level in sharing with non-Jewish friends and neighbors? And that's a question, one question of several that I'm going to put out there. And for me, it rings very true. Nina and I were on Zoom earlier today discussing this question. And afterwards, I was talking with a friend who is not Jewish. She lives down in the Carolinas. And I was explaining about Hamantashen to her. And she said, and so what's Purim and why do you eat this? And I went into like a 10-minute capsule of what is Purim and why do we eat this? But thinking all the time, am I going to say, this is like Halloween and we do, and I didn't do that. It could have been so much easier to do that. But instead, I presented to her the story of history and the theme of assimilation. And she was really fascinated. She's from Norway. So she was like, really, this is very interesting. And she was married to someone who was Italian and Catholic. So for her, she was really getting a new take. So my question is, when we're celebrating a holiday that's uniquely Jewish, what is our comfort level in sharing with those who are not Jewish? And please feel free to raise your hand and unmute and share with us briefly so that we can take turns. Gracia?
Yes, thank you. I'm not Jewish, but my husband was Jewish. He died 6 years ago. My children are Jewish, bar mitzvah, everything. I have remained Christian in a way, but because I need to be ready and I'm not ready and so whatever. But I still go to the synagogue and I love not only the Jewish holidays, but also the Jewish ethics. Now, I have a twin sister. Now, she has, now and then to hurt me, she comes out with anti-Semitic things. Nothing terrible, but, annoying. And I find it very, very disrespectful. Now, my sister's been living with me since the beginning of COVID, so about 1 year. And at the beginning, I did not want to celebrate the Sabbath or, the candles, not to offend her. And then I realized that I did not want to live like this because it didn't really help in any case. She was still making remarks. So now I am lighting the candles, I'm saying the prayers in Hebrew, and that's too bad. And her reaction has changed. Now she doesn't say anything. So in a way, if you want to call it coming out or somehow be revealing of what you are and what you believe, it's actually a better way to do than just not really hiding, but not wanting to be conspicuous. So this has been my experience.
And you used an amazing word, if I will say, because you used the word revealing. And I think that word is just so key to this discussion of assimilation and masking. And really, you said coming out, and you used that expression, and you used revealing. And I think, thank you so much for what you shared. Thank you very, very much. Do other people want, have any thoughts or want to share anything on this? On, what's your comfort level? And how much are you looking to, we're always told to try to, connect with other people. So it's very easy. People are walking around saying, oh, Hanukkah, it's like the Jewish Christmas, no big deal, same thing, people really, try to, when I've done a lot of Seders in Christian settings, I'm always invited to do a Passover Seder in a church someplace. They say, oh, well, it's like Easter. I mean, it's just this, and so people, but my feeling is in a lot of cases, you have to correct it, but people want to join with you, and they're looking for a similarity and a connection, and they don't mean anything wrong, but they're not educated. And so how do you do that if you're comfortable? Because that was my question. Are you comfortable? How, then how do you work it through in a gentle way where, there's still a connection, but you're still separate. You are not them, you're not one, you're different. And so I wonder, when we think about this, how much of our unique traditions do we hide? How much do we share? Because you're taking off your mask. You're revealing, like Gracia said, you're revealing who you are. So I'm wondering if there are any thoughts on this. How much are you willing to reveal? Barbara.
One of the things that was brought up to me recently was the concept that when people that the phrase, Judeo-Christian, whatever, is usually used by Christians to wrap Judaism in with them, as opposed to it being a shared thing. And that there's often this expectation that way. And it's also an othering, like, this is a Judeo-Christian country, which others everybody who's not.
Yeah. And so how do we make it inclusive, in terms of these things, but how do we also keep our identity? And how much of your identity are you willing to sacrifice? Because it is a sacrifice. If you totally assimilate and don't maintain that uniqueness of who you are or who we are as a people, then is that a disservice? Is it really sort of is it dishonoring our traditions, whoever we are, whether we're Jewish or from another tradition? And how do we reconcile that? Because I think of raising children, and you send your kids off to school, and in my case they went into a local school district where there were 5 Jews out of everyone, and they wanted to belong. It was very hard. They wanted to be like everybody else, and being pointed out or being asked something where your answer was different. Oh, we celebrate Hanukkah and it's this. How do you work with that? And one of the things I always taught them, and I learned myself, was that I needed to know my own traditions because I needed to be able to understand and explain what the differences were. So I don't know if people have any thoughts about how much of your own tradition you've ever hidden, and how much you're willing to share. Gloria?
Yeah, I'll share something. I moved into an active adult community, which was very mixed in terms of the different faiths. And a number of years ago, one of the Christians, we were having a meeting, and one of the Christian gentlemen in the group said, the holidays are coming, and what do you think about doing a Seder? So we got together and we planned a Seder with the foods and with the rituals, and it was a shared experience, and it was wonderful. Everybody enjoyed it. Everybody learned something from it. It brought us closer together as a community, and I think it helped everyone to understand, my background and my faith, and it has taught me not to be ashamed to share and to be open. Yeah. When I was a kid growing up, I lived in an Italian neighborhood, and my Italian friends took me to church with them all the time while they went to confession, and I sat in the back of the church, and I lived I lived in a community.
Gracie.
Gloria, sorry.
I lived in a community that was Italian and very Orthodox Jewish.
Oh my.
And we were, I don't know what we were, to tell you the truth. But anyway, I felt very uncomfortable because I didn't have a place there.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I don't think I was accepted for my Judaism, even with my friends. I had one specific incident where one of the friends said something to me that was not very nice, and it hurt very deeply.
Yeah, like you said.
But I'm not sure where that came from. I think it just came from her background and her you know, not necessarily her prejudices, but her family's. And so she lashed out. And it was very hurtful to me.
And I think, you know, part of that is that what you did with this Seder, it's a lot of education, it's a lot of discussion, it's a lot of planning. And through that, you know, there's able to forge, you know, growth so that you can stand in your own strength and you can stand in your own integrity for who you are and what you know, group you identify with pride, you know, and that's the work that we have, I think, continue to do going forward. I'm conscious of the time. I want to make sure that we end on time because that's something we always try to do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the prayers, the closing prayer. We always open Purim with an opening. We did a series of prayers because that's what's done. And there's a prayer that is done at the end of Purim and the Megillah reading. And so I've done a little work on this prayer because I want to talk with you a little bit about it as we end the evening. There's an original blessing that's said, that's on our screen when the Megillah reading is done. And it says, "Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who takes up our grievance, judges our claim, avenges our wrong, who brings just retribution upon all enemies of our soul, and exacts vengeance for us from our foes. Blessed are you, Adonai, who exacts vengeance for his people Israel from all their foes, the God who brings salvation." So in looking at this and in reading it and in living in the times that we live in today, I felt I needed to rework the closing prayer for Purim because I was uncomfortable with the idea of retribution and vengeance. And, you know, I didn't feel comfortable with that. And so I offer a contemporary version for the closing of the Megillah and the closing of our evening together, which says, "Blessed are you, source of all life, who advocates for us and is our lifeline. Blessed are you, eternal one, the God who is ever present." And I think that's really what we've been talking about tonight, is a God who, although hidden in the story and not mentioned in the text, is ever present and has listened to God's people and has been there and has been a lifeline through the teachings of the Torah and the teachings of our tradition throughout the existence of our people, and will, I pray and I know, continue to do so. I hope everyone has enjoyed spending Purim with us. We hope that you've had a bunch of laughs and you've liked our Hamantashen, our talking Hamantashens, and our comedian. We worked very hard to put those into this program tonight. And, you know, we've also had some very serious discussion this evening, and we really want to thank you for being with us so that we can celebrate the holiday of Purim in community tonight. And so thank you, everybody, for celebrating with us. And we wish everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure.
Great
Thank
job.
you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Happy Purim.
Happy Purim. And one final announcement. Ellen, you sent me a poem and I got it, and I opened it in the middle when people were in the chat rooms. We're going to send that poem on masking, wearing a mask, to everybody as a follow-up letter. So,
when we were talking about masks at the beginning, I don't know if you saw, but right before I was pulling it out so I could share it with everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
we'll
thank
send
you.
it to everyone. And thank you so much. Barbara?
Yes. Could you also send out your version of that closing blessing, please?
Yes, it would be my pleasure. I'll be happy to do so. So we'll send you those in a follow-up letter that's always sent out after the program. And good night, everybody. Be well.
Night.
Stay
Good
safe.
night.
Say hello to Neil.
Thank you. Night.
Night.